Hey everyone, my name is Poisonblade and I hope all of you are doing well today. So since it's getting near the end of the year, I had this idea to look at my past builds and pick my 5 favorite or 5 best builds. Now this list is not going to include any of my recent builds because then it would be entirely made up of builds in the old quarter of Kanaal or the University of Valhalla. So I'm going to look at my older builds, and also, yes, this list is going to be perhaps a bit shocking, confusing, hopefully interesting, because some of the builds that are going to be on this list are the builds that you wouldn't really think of when you think of Poison's best builds. So if you have any of your own mentions of what you think are my best builds or what builds you like the best, put them down below in the comments. I would love to see what you guys think are my best builds. But let's get started with my 5 best or favorite builds. Starting off with number 5, which might be shocking to some people just because of how low this build is on the list. I think a lot of people will probably think that this would be my number 1 build, but number 5 on my list of my favorite or best builds is the Hagia Sophia of the Royal Palace of Kanaal. Now there's a reason why this one is lower on the list, but that's actually going to be part of another video. But the reason why it is on this list in the first place is because it's just such an iconic building for Kanaal, and it really changed my approach to building. It really set the stage for later mega builds, because this was, if you include the old version of Kanaal, this was just my 3rd mega build. And yes, I still have nightmares of trying to pull off that interior dome structure. The Hagia Sophia in real life is a very complex building, and I have never been to the Hagia Sophia in real life. I've never been to Turkey in real life. So all I had to go off of was Assassin's Creed Revelations and all of the paintings that I could find, or the pictures of the building. There's some kind of blueprints of the building, but I had no real life experience when it came to the Hagia Sophia. So trying to make that building, which as I said again is a very complex building with all of the domes, all of the walls had to be made custom. Building the Hagia Sophia really tested my skills and the limits of my skills when it came to building in Planet Zoo, and I'm so proud with how it turned out. Is it perfect? No, but it's definitely one of my best mega builds, and I'm so proud of just how it blended into Kanaal, because Kanaal doesn't have a lot of Byzantine architecture, and somehow the Hagia Sophia just blends in completely with the Greek architecture, the Ethiopian architecture, the Arabian architecture. The Hagia Sophia, yes, I changed the colors of it just so that it blends in a little bit more easily by using the colors that were already present in Kanaal, but even with that, the entire structure is so different from everything else in Kanaal. Somehow pulling it off that it just blends in easily with Kanaal it's mind-boggling to me. The entire building in general is just why did I build that? Was I trying to make my hair turn gray prematurely? What was with me? But I'm so proud of how it turned out. All of those windows, as I said, all of the walls had to be custom made, all of the domes and such, and it's a huge build. So that's why it's on the list. It's such an iconic build and I'm so proud of it, and it really set the stage for later large builds, or mega builds as I would call them. Now for 4th place on the list, and if you think that this list was going to get any less shocking, you have another thing coming for you, because this build is probably a large unknown for a lot of people. I feel like it went under the radar for a lot of people, and it's also the smallest build on this list. So number 4 on the list of my favorite or best builds is the Statue of Order in Valhalla. Now, as I said, this is the smallest build on this list, because I am just counting the statue. I'm not counting the temple structure that went with it. I'm not counting the forest that went with it. This is just the statue. So number 4 on this list is just the Statue of Order. And the reason why it is on number 4, or it is in 4th place, is because it was the first statue of its kind that really just made things click in my head on how to build statues going forward. So all of the other statues that I've made since are because of the Aura statue. And it's also the only statue of its kind, I would say. It's the only, I would say, action statue. Because the Statue of Aura, like, he's drawing his bow, he's ready to shoot, he's really in this action pose. And all of my other statues that I've built after the Statue of Aura, I would call passive statues, because yes, they are impressive, yes, they are pretty, but they are just standing there. Like, my favorite statue is the Statue of Hades, but he's still just sort of standing there. So that made it so that the Statue of Aura actually is better in my books than the Statue of Hades, because there's action in it. Even though it is a statue, so there's no actual movement in it, it feels like there's movement in the statue. And I would love to make more statues like the Statue of Aura. Now, as I said, it was also the first statue of its kind. So the Statue of Aura really set how I built statues after that one. So every statue that you've seen after the Statue of Aura is inspired or influenced by the Statue of Aura, because the Statue of Aura really made things click in my head on like how proportions worked when it came to statues, what the pieces are that I could use for like body parts and such, how to like sort of define muscle structures in statues. So if the Statue of Aura was never built, then I would probably have never built statues in the first place. So every build containing a statue after the Statue of Aura in thanks to the Statue of Aura. So even though the build in itself is a tiny build, it influenced so many other builds, and just without the Statue of Aura, a lot of other builds wouldn't have been made in the first place. So like the Statue of Daiji that I made for Esther and Suyana wouldn't have been built. The Statue of Hades wouldn't exist. The Statue of Poseidon, which might be comparable when it comes to like action statue, like he's in his chariot or riding his chariot. There's these weird seahorse kind of creatures pulling the chariot. But even that I wouldn't call an action statue, because Poseidon himself is just standing there. So the Statue of Aura is in a way the best statue that I've made, because it just influenced so many other things. And yes, I also like the Statue of Hades, but I need to realize that if I didn't make the Statue of Aura, the Statue of Hades wouldn't exist. So that's it for why the Statue of Aura is 4th place on this list. Again, it's the smallest build that I am including on this list, but it's so significant in how statues have been coming after this one that I had to include this one on the list. And I also just really like Aura. Like, if I were a god, I would be Aura, because he's basically a hermit and he loves the cold. So let's move on before I go further into rambling mode. Well, for 3rd place on the list, it's a little bit more of a classic build, I would say. It's one that is relatively more well known, but the 3rd place on this list is the Wizard's Tower in Valhalla. Is it the largest build? No, but it's one where I'm really happy with how the terrain just worked out with it. It's the one where it's all custom made, like all of the walls and everything had to be custom made. I love how I integrated a habitat with this build, and it really gave Valhalla its own like sort of place. Like, Valhalla really to me became its own project after I built the Wizard's Tower. That's when I really started taking Valhalla seriously as a project, because before the Wizard's Tower, Valhalla was kind of just like, let's have fun with some Viking Norse builds. And then when I built the Wizard's Tower, it was like, yes, Valhalla is a worthwhile project for me, and I spend a lot more time in Valhalla after that one. As I said, like, I love how I integrated the red panda habitat with the Wizard's Tower. I also just like the idea of a wizard just conjuring red pandas, just the Wizard's Tower in general. It was kind of like the Hagia Sophia for Ken Shire. For me, the Wizard's Tower is icon for Valhalla. Like, yes, the university came afterwards, and then Thorstad, which also became icons. Thorstad, to me, more so than the university. It all started with the Wizard's Tower. And I just love how it's fantasy, definitely. Like, such a structure wouldn't exist in real life, and it really just set the tone for more fantasy structures in Valhalla after this one. Like, before that one, I was like, really just like, everything needs to be Norse, everything needs to be Viking. And so building the Wizard's Tower in Valhalla just gave me that more like freedom to also build other buildings when it came to like architecture style, more fantasy related buildings. So the university, Torstad, like those aren't Norse builds. University is like Slavic or just Eastern European. Torstad is, I would say, more general fantasy medieval. The Wizard's Tower really just broke open the gates for Valhalla to be this like serious project with more fantasy influence to make it this more like vibrant place. So the Wizard's Tower is just also, just as I said, I think it's one of the best ways that I've integrated a habitat with a build like that. So also just where it's positioned, like it's in the perfect position when it comes to Valhalla. Like looking from the bridge into Torstad or from Torstad, it's just overlooking everything in that area. So I really just love position, how it all turned out. Everything had to be custom made. So everything that has to be custom made, I'm a little bit more proud of because, I mean, again, it has to be custom made, so it takes a lot more time. And then how just it blends in with the terrain work, like that side tower that just sort of is nesting on that outcropping of rocks, which I really didn't build my rock work like that before. So all of the rock work that you see since is inspired by the Wizard's Tower. I definitely did not copy parts of the rock work that I did for the Wizard's Tower in other places in Valhalla. I definitely did not do that. But yeah, the Wizard's Tower in Valhalla, 3rd place on the list. Now we're moving on to the 2nd place, or the penultimate place on this list. And I've already kind of mentioned this build before. It's another mega build, so saying that should already significantly cut down on the potential builds that 2nd place could be. But 2nd place on the list of my best or favorite builds goes to Mashaf Castle in Khan al-Bashar. What can I say? I love building castles, so a castle was obviously going to be high up on the list. But Mashaf Castle, just the sheer amount of difficulty I had when building that castle and then how it turned out makes it get a special place in my heart. Because saying that trying to find references for building Mashaf Castle was difficult would be a massive understatement. Because Mashaf Castle in real life doesn't really exist anymore. To my knowledge, Mashaf Castle in real life is basically just ruins, and then Mashaf Castle in Khan al-Bashar wasn't really based off of Mashaf Castle in real life. It was based completely on Mashaf Castle in Assassin's Creed. So yes, I might have potentially bought 2 Assassin's Creed games just to explore Mashaf Castle to get all of the references that I needed. I might have spent way too long looking at the art book for Assassin's Creed Revelations to fill up any of the empty places that I couldn't explore in-game. Yes, I definitely bought the original Assassin's Creed just to explore Mashaf Castle. I might potentially have also bought Assassin's Creed Revelations to explore Mashaf Castle. So I spent money to build Mashaf Castle in Planet Zoo, which is something I would probably have never done for any of my other builds, but then I also love the Assassin's Creed series, so there's that. Just the sheer amount of difficulty when it came to finding the references for Mashaf Castle, seeing how it turned out, seeing how it so easily works with the rest of Khan al-Bashar. Actually, Mashaf Castle lore-wise is a major hiccup for Khan al-Bashar, because lore-wise, you might have noticed that recently I'm building more of my own stories, and I'm not so much relying on existing stories like fairy tales or stories from 1001 Nights or Arabian Nights. Like, I'm making more of my own stories, but Mashaf Castle is so heavily rooted and based on Assassin's Creed that lore-wise it's kind of difficult to make it blend in with the rest of the lore of Khan al-Bashar. Seeing how the castle turned out, seeing how it just works so well as a gateway into the Mirage Mountains and into inner city of Khan al-Bashar, or is going to be a gateway into the inner city. Just like, again, it's of course also a castle, so I also love just building castles, as I've said before, but Mashaf Castle, I want to use Mashaf Castle as the blueprint for all of my other builds or castles going forward, which I can already sense that my PC starts crying like it's traumatized, because Mashaf Castle, as I said, is a mega build, and piece count wise, it's definitely deserving of that title, because most, if not, well, yeah, the huge tower in front is completely custom made, and then a lot of other places are completely custom made when it comes to like the walls and such. And just, yeah, the piece count is very high on Mashaf Castle, but it was worth it. And I want to build more places like that. Mashaf Castle is my second favorite place to wander around in Kernoubshar. Yeah, we should actually move on to the first place on this list. My favorite place to wander around in Kernoubshar. So yes, first place is not going to Valhalla. It's definitely not going to Arzaru or Isla Pacifica, but it's definitely in Kernoubshar. I definitely don't have a favorite project. What are you talking about? So we've come to the end of the list. First place, the ultimate build, my best and favorite build. And this one might potentially be surprising or shocking to people because it's not a mega build. It's not really a big build. Well, it's an area actually, because it's a combination of 3 builds. And first place goes to the Royal Vineyard of Kernoubshar. Is it a huge build? Land-wise or area-wise? Yes. Is it a huge build build-wise? Not really. But when it comes to the Royal Vineyard, I am thinking of Kane's Manor, the Barrel Maker and the Vineyard, so that area of Kernoubshar. But it's my favorite place to just wander around, because the Royal Vineyard has something that a lot of my other builds don't achieve, which is harmony or serenity, because the Royal Vineyard has this perfect harmony of detailed builds with also just like the enough foliage. Like this is a thing where I can very easily overdo it, and usually overdo it is making my builds too detailed, too like grand, and then also doing too much foliage. Like I very easily cross that boundary of overdoing things. But when it comes to the Royal Vineyard, it's like this perfect place with Kane's Manor, the Barrel Maker, and the actual vineyard building itself, and then the vineyards in between all of those buildings. It's that perfect blend of just enough detailing, just the right amount of foliage, and just like the right vibe. Because again, I very easily overdo it. Very easily I put too much plants in, put too much detailing into my builds. With the Barrel Maker, with the Vineyard and Kane's Manor, it's like the perfect amount of detailing and serene. All of it works. Kane's Manor actually, it's kind of an outlier when it comes to like the Barrel Maker and the Vineyard, because it doesn't adhere to the same color palette. Like Kane's Manor is mostly like brown tones, whereas the Barrel Maker and the Vineyard have a lot of blue tones in it. But just having that variation actually makes this area work even better, because it creates, as I said, this variation, and it makes it so that while it is a very serene place, it very easily could have been a boring place. But Kane's Manor actually adds just enough variation without being like outlandishly different. Yes, I love this area so much, and I wanted to have more of the Elysian Fields kind of look like this area. But again, I've very easily gone beyond the boundary of what's too much. So I might redo some of the farmlands in the Elysian Fields. When I have no inspiration, I always go to the Royal Vineyard. I always look at the Barrel Maker. I always look at Kane's Manor. Not so much actually the Vineyard itself, because I mean it's kind of the same as the Barrel Maker. And the Barrel Maker is a little bit more of like an exceptional build when it comes between those two. But I always go to this area. I always go to the Royal Vineyard to get inspiration, or if I have like a stressful day, I always go to the Royal Vineyard to de-stress, because again, it's this perfect harmony of being this serene place while also showing like the wealth and opulence and just magnificence of Kernoubshar without overdoing it. I love building mega builds. I mean, you can see that because 2 of the places on this list were mega builds. But then I also love just building farmlands, building those smaller, more serene places. I have the issue of easily overdoing what I am doing, and the Royal Vineyard just has that perfect middle point of being serene. It's just like, it's this perfect place in my heart. And I wish I had built more like this, but I need to learn how to not overdo things. But now we've come to the end of this list of my most favorite and best builds. I know that it might have been surprising to see the Royal Vineyard end up in first place, with it not being a mega build. But in my opinion, the Royal Vineyard is my best and certainly my most favorite build, because it strikes this perfect balance between the amount of detailing on the buildings and then the serenity in the landscape that surrounds them. And it just has this perfect harmony of the opulence of Kernoubshar without being too chaotic, with having this harmony and this peaceful nature in the entire area, still with enough variation to make the area interesting. But this has been my list of my favorite and best builds. I would love to see what your list is of your favorite builds of mine. Maybe you agree with this list, maybe you disagree with this list in its entirety and you think it's rubbish, but I would love to see your guys' list of your favorite builds of mine. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then there's of course the like and subscribe button if you want to see more. There's also the notification button, but before that one starts working, I will stop taking screenshots in the Royal Vineyard. With that being said, I wish all of you an amazing day. Bye bye.